All right, hi everybody, and thank you for joining me today. I hope this little bit of time that we spent here is worth your while. And what I did was just take a bunch of random, it might be very random, issues and questions that have come up as I've been working. Have worked at Home Depot in the garden center for 21 years, but I've been in the retail garden business for 26 years. So I see a lot of the same things, and of course I've made mistakes myself. So this beautiful photo, by the way, was taken at St. Mary's Hospital in Hobart many years ago. I just love the design of the landscaping in that. So the first thing you want to consider in landscaping is choose the right plant for the right place. That's just a saying you hear in garden circles. Right plant, right place. And if you do that, you'll avoid a lot of problems. And I'll show you some real funny ones here in a minute. Location, first of all, by the way, if you've never been to Fox Hosta Farm in Lowell, that's at the bottom right corner, they have had a hosta collection, I guess you'd say, that has become an addiction, or maybe it's gone overboard, but they are open on, usually weekends and certain times specified. They have a Facebook page, really awesome to go look. So it's kind of like a hobby that got out of control. But that is definitely a shady area there, and the hostas are doing very well. But the coreopsis and the salvia on the left really, really like sun. You'll see on the plant tags, it'll tell you fold apart sun. And I have to say, some plants, if you'll say full sun is 6 hours or more, part sun, 3 to 4 hours. But plants won't necessarily die if they don't have the right amount of sun. It's not like they're going to die. But what will happen is the leaves might get bigger, or because they're trying to get more light, or the leaves might be smaller. If it's a variegated plant that you're growing for color, the color might be a little different. There might be more stem or more spaces between the stem, I can't think of the name for it, where the leaves come there. There might be more spaces there. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going to die, but just something to keep in mind. It'll do better if it has the right location, the right amount of sun. Here's the funny one here. The two arborvitaes over here, and the left-hand picture, there is, I'm sure, a picture window in there somewhere. Now, one of the most popular trees that we sell and in the industry, I guess you would say, is the emerald green arborvitae. And that still will get pretty tall depending on who's writing the plant tags. But I have a feeling that is not emerald green. I don't even know if that's an arborvitae. It's kind of hard to tell from here. But they definitely planted something way too big right on either side. They probably envisioned either side of the picture window. The tree on the right is an ash tree in front of my house, or was. I actually had it taken down just a few weeks ago. It was getting to the point where we saw emerald ash borer damage. But NIPSCO, this was taken right after NIPSCO pruned it. And I really don't think it was necessary to have pruned it quite that drastically, but you could see all the branches on one side. And you've probably seen worse damage from trees that have had to be trimmed because of utilities. Okay, pay attention to zone. We're in zone 5 right up here. This is the USDA map, and it starts at the top and goes all the way down. There are some places in the country where they pay attention to where they pay more attention to heat zones than we do frost zones. But you'll see on plant tags. Now, unfortunately, like I said, I work at Home Depot. We get our plants from all over. And we have this purple fountain grass in our garden center is tagged perennial. But if you look carefully on the tag on the back, it will say hardy to 30 degrees. And we always get colder than 30 degrees here. So that is perennial somewhere. And the grower, that's just what the tag says. So you got to be careful. Same thing with the, I saw hydrangeas in our gift floral area that people were buying after Mother's Day. And I just, I tried to caution anybody, take a look. And sometimes they'll have a variety name on it that you could look up and see what the variety is for those hydrangeas. But oftentimes there's no name on them at all, so you don't know. Dahlias are not perennials. They have to be dug up in the fall. But this Nico blue hydrangea that's been around for years can be very disappointing. Now, on the left is a picture of a hydrangea that's not in bloom. And as long as I can remember 30 years ago, people saying, I have this beautiful hydrangea and it doesn't bloom. It looks beautiful, right? No blooms. And it's because this type of hydrangea macrophylla, blooms on old wood from the year before, and winter basically has pruned it for them. Now, the one on the right, Endless Summer, and there are plenty like it. Proven Winners has some hydrangeas that have been hybridized and to bloom on old wood and new wood. So if freezing temperatures peel back the flowers, so you just have the stalks, you've probably seen that, just the dead stems, and all that's dead stems from last time, but also that anything that has died over winter is where the flowers would have been. So the new ones will bloom on new growth as well. So I hate to see people get disappointed or sometimes we have the little Nico blue hydrangeas that are dormant in boxes. And sometimes I feel like I talk people out of buying things more than anything. Okay, something to remember, annuals don't behave like perennials. Annuals, and sometimes it's easy. I think like, okay, taxes, you do that every year. Well, that doesn't mean an annual comes back every year. That means you plant it every year. So even trying to remember that way doesn't help. But an annual lives for 1 year. Now, occasionally an annual will reseed and you'll have it the following year. But the one important thing to remember about an annual and a perennial is an annual is going to bloom all summer long. So it's kind of a trade-off. I think you need a little bit of both in a garden. A perennial like this daylily will come back year after year after year, but most perennials will only bloom for a few weeks. Now, Stella d'Oro daylily, which was hybridized by a guy from Lake County, that will bloom on and off all summer long. And that's pretty unusual for a daylily. Just like most perennials, they will bloom only for a short time. So I always recommend having an assortment of perennials that have different growth habits, different foliage shapes and textures, and then also have some annuals in pots or toward the front of your border or whatever. I like perennials and I like shrubs even more, flowering shrubs, because they fill up space and they add texture and form to your garden. So I think you need a little bit of both. When you're ready to plant something, like in this case, a balled and burlapped tree, the drawing shows the right way to do it. You don't want to dig your hole deeper because as it settles, your plant is going to be like it's not going to be where the root flare is here, this part here. You want it to be at the same level that it should be, that it was grown in to begin with. You can dig your hole wider, and if you're going to amend the soil, you want to mix that soil amendment like a compost or whatever, you want to mix it in with what is there. If you have clay soil, plant it so that this original plant, this is the original soil level, plant it so it's sticking up a little bit. And that helps give it a little bit of an elevation and helps with drainage for those littler roots that are near the surface. Anytime you see a tree or shrub that is all compacted like this, the roots are compacted. Actually, I have an orchid sitting right here that's starting to look like that. I need to repot it. Anytime you see something like that, you can take this you take your hands or take this like a little trowel thingy or little fork thing, and kind of hack away at it. This is all real fibrous roots, so they're actually using a knife to cut that up with, but you could take your hands and tease it apart. That will encourage new growth, because otherwise, and will cause the roots to grow out a little bit. This looks like just little veggie plants at the bottom, but they do the same thing. You want to kind of tear them up a little bit and encourage new root growth. Little late to be telling you guys this. Don't plant your annuals too early. There is no exact date. We can't say May 5th is the date or May 15th because it always depends on weather. I think we had a little bit of cooler season this year, didn't we? I don't remember now. I always think Mother's Day, Memorial Day. Those are probably the two biggest days for garden centers, Mother's Day and Memorial Day. But something like a tomato plant or pepper, which really, really likes hot weather, it's not really going to do much until it starts to get warm anyway. Now that's damage on a tomato plant from being too cold. So I have actually heard that if you plant too early in your tomatoes, you might think, okay, they're not doing anything, but I've actually heard that it stunts their growth for the rest of the summer. So don't be in too big of a hurry. You don't want to work that hard anyway. There are things you could do to protect them, but I'm just saying there's probably not gonna, they'll catch up eventually anyway. Okay, now we're talking about preventing problem. Beware of free plants. Gardeners are nice. They like to share with each other. And this is a drainage ditch in front of my house. I live on Route 55 in Merrillville and been here 30 years. Several years ago, I dug up some of those, we call them ditch lilies for that reason. They grow in roadside ditches everywhere. And I dug some up and planted them in my garden. And before long, they were like 5 feet away. They were popping up. And I called a daylily grower in Missouri, Gilbert Wild, talked to them about it. And they said they had seen a house planted on top of some, and they still, because they grow from rhizomes, runners. So daylilies, for example, will stay in a nice clump. The hybrid ones will. This is Hemerocallis. Daylilies are not really lilies. This is Hemerocallis fulva, and it spreads by rhizomes. Ornamental grasses are another one. There are some, and sometimes the tag will actually tell you, if you go to buy one, it will say that whether it's a clumping grass or a running grass. And most people want something to stay well behaved. Here's this is on the left, that beautiful daylily. There's so many better options of the hybrids that behave better. The bottom right corner is mint. And mint is something, actually, I posted on Facebook last summer or 2 summers ago. Does anybody have mint I can get? I just wanted some for a recipe. And a friend of mine brought over a paper bag full of, she pulled it out of her garden, mint. Mint has square stems. Next time you look at a plant that's invasive, like Creeping Charlie's another one, roll the stem between your fingers and see if it has a square stem, and then it's a sign that it's in the mint family, and it will take over. Mint belongs in a container. I don't think I would really ever put it in a pot. Up in the top right is a plant called perilla. Now that a friend and I were shopping somewhere and she admired it, and the owner of the little shop said, I'll give you some. Well, when people have so much to give away, there's usually a reason for it, right? And then we found out later on it could be invasive. Just looking at it, it almost looks like a coleus or something, and you think, wow, who wouldn't want a perennial coleus? But that is not a coleus. It's called perilla, very invasive. Another thing to look into are plants that are invasive and sometimes illegal. And in this case, I got the question mark there because some of these are not illegal yet. But some of these are very common shrubs that you are familiar with. And I just need to bring these to your attention. These two up here, the emerald and gaiety euonymus and emerald and gold euonymus, very popular landscaping plants, are now illegal to sell in the state of Indiana because they are invasive. Now those, if you have them in your yard, you're okay, but you can no longer buy them because they pop up everywhere else. So it's not like somebody's going to come looking for you because you have those in your yard. Same thing with burning bush. Barberries are no longer able to be sold in the state of Indiana. Honeysuckle, the native honeysuckle is fine. And Jonathan probably could, I don't remember, Jonathan, maybe you could mention the native one or the non-native one, invasive one. One of them has hollow stems. That's how you could tell them apart. And so the non-native ones are not able to be sold. Now the pear trees are still for sale. Jonathan, were you going to say? Oh, maybe
yeah, that was correct. The non-native ones have the hollow stem.
Non-native have hollow stems. So you should not be able to buy a non-native Japanese honeysuckle at a garden center. And sometimes it happens. I've seen them at our store. Because we get our plants sometimes from Canada or sometimes from growers in Illinois. And that's still a fairly new law. So I think I'm not seeing that so much anymore. Now the English ivy in the bottom right, oh my gosh, I should have showed a picture of that. That will take over. Thankfully, we don't live in the South where kudzu is a problem, right? But anyway, the flowering pears are not, they're still for sale, although they are popping up everywhere. If you look in the spring, you saw them all over neighborhoods and absolutely beautiful. And I've recommended them to a lot of people doing landscaping through the years. But now they're starting to see that they are cross-pollinating with other trees and popping up in, like you'll see an undeveloped lot in your neighborhood or on the roadside, and you'll see them popping up there too. Now they're still for sale because growers have so much invested. They've been, you tell a garden center, no, now you cannot sell this plant, or a grower rather, that you cannot sell this plant that you've already invested, 5 years or more growing. That would be detrimental to that. So I guess they've decided it's not that bad of a problem, and they're going to allow them. It's the ethics of it all, which is better for most people, I guess. So for the sake of the industry, they're allowed to sell them for a little while longer. Okay, newer plants and hybridizers are working on this all the time. Newer plants are more disease resistant. And in this case, this is the phlox called ultraviolet. It's a proven winner's plant. But on the left is what phlox looks like with powdery mildew on it. And that is one of the things. It seems like, I notice dog breeds too the same way. They're prone to get something. And plants like roses tend to get black spot, and phlox tends to get powdery mildew. But the newer ones, they're being hybridized not to do that. So look for the newer varieties that are, here's a rose bush. The rose bush on the left, that's in my yard, which I think this is funny. I should have put this as a what not to do, and I meant to put a separate slide in it. Years ago, well, I planted that probably 25 years ago. I literally do nothing to it. It does not get black spot anything. It's called William Baffin, a very hardy rose in the Canadian Explorer series, because it's so hardy. They named it after Canadian explorers. But I found a tomato cage on there. Like, I thought that tomato cage was going to hold that rose bush up, and that thing's probably 10 feet tall. Now, on the bottom right are knockout roses, and they are less likely to get black spot, which you see in that top right picture. I have been reading, though, and I need to look more into this, that they are discovering that they're not as disease resistant, or maybe they're just losing their disease resistance. That's something I saw in passing, and I need to look into that more. But hybrid tea roses, very prone to black spot and other diseases. And you know what's in the same family as a rose are apple trees. Apple trees, crab apple trees, in the same family, prone to the same diseases. So if you're looking for a tree, and I hate to say don't buy them at never mind, I won't say that. I can't say that. I work there. But garden centers, or even at Home Depot, the big box stores, will still have disease-resistant varieties. But if you're looking for an apple tree, for example, there's no need to just go, oh, there's a Jonathan, or oh, there's Golden Delicious, when they have been improved upon in so many ways. Okay, research the plant size. This is a lilac bush. This is a Miss Kim lilac, I think, and Miss Kim is sometimes would be called a dwarf lilac. The Latin name would be Syringa palabin, I think. And the common lilac is a different relative. It's Syringa vulgaris, the vulgar, the common lilac. The common lilac could get 10, 12 feet tall, maybe bigger. And so when people saw this dwarf lilac, get pretty excited about that. But the dwarf lilac at my house is still maybe 8 feet tall. And for the record, most plants, shrubs, perennials, whatever, unless it's like an ornamental grass or something, a lot of plants are going to, most all, but especially shrubs, are going to always grow wide if they are tall. I have a spot in my front of my house that I wish I had planted something a little farther away. And now I'm trying to think, what can I plant there that will stay narrow and not get wide and still be tall? It's hard to find unless it's a a perennial, like maybe a coneflower or something that's tall. But shrubs, for the most part, shrubs will grow rounded or vase shaped. So it's really hard to find something that will stay small that's also going to be tall. I had a customer just the other day looking for something about 2 feet wide. He didn't mind if it's spread out this way, but if it's 2 feet wide, it's going to probably be 2 feet wide in the other direction as well, and probably not much taller than that as well. But again, hybridizers are coming up with new things, and Proven Winners has a series of lilacs that are like 2 to 3 feet tall. So again, do the research, read the tag, see what it says. Oh yeah, here we go. Bloomerang lilac. There's Bloomerang pink, and there's also purple. There's that endless summer hydrangea in the middle. And then Weigela. This one only gets like just a few feet tall, and it also has variegated leaves. So again, the reason I mentioned flowering shrubs, something like this one, which has variegated leaves, is still going to look nice even when it's not blooming. And shrubs, just like perennials, because they are there year after year, are not going to bloom forever. My Monet Weigela will bloom for a few weeks. There is also a sunset Weigela that has orange and other colors in the foliage. Very nice. Okay. Prune shrubs at the right time to avoid losing the flowers. Like I mentioned with that hydrangea, although we have to worry about winter pruning those hydrangeas, and we're talking about just the macrophylla type, the big mop head ones. But if you were to prune a lilac bush now, what is this now, July? It's probably getting too late, maybe even for that. But you would prune something that blooms, prune it right after it's done blooming if you want to control it for size. You don't necessarily have to prune it at all. But if you were to prune a lilac bush in September, you won't have any flowers the following year because it blooms on wood that is growing this year. Same thing with the Weigela, the hydrangeas, although there's 6 or 7 different varieties or families of hydrangea. And so there are some that it wouldn't matter, but those mop head ones, it does. So just make sure you know what you have, what type of plant you have, and when it blooms. Clematis is another thing. I think there's different types of clematis. Clematis bloom at different times, and you prune it at different times. Okay, go easy on the fertilizer. I know a lot of people think, oh, I'll fertilize it and it's going to do awesome. And so they put too much fertilizer on it. When it comes to your lawn, you could burn your lawn if you do it too often, or if you overlap when you're putting the spreader on. Nitrogen, which is those three numbers you see out on the bag of fertilizer, it'll say, 5, 10, 15 or whatever. The first number is nitrogen. So if you put fertilizer on too often, or you put 2 different types of fertilizer on, it's very possible that you'll get too much nitrogen. And since nitrogen is for leaf growth, it's very possible you could have a plant with wonderful leaves, wonderful foliage. The plant will look great, but it won't have flowers. That middle number, phosphorus, is for flowering and fruiting. And the bottom number, potassium, you'll have to talk to a chemist, I guess, about why it's K. I guess P was taken. But anyway, so you'll see a higher middle number for like the Miracle Grow Bloom Booster fertilizer has a higher middle number. And if it's something that you want to produce fruit sometimes, or vegetables, sometimes the number there is a little higher because flowers produce the fruit. Now, occasionally, this happens every year. There's people who ask about calcium for tomatoes. And so they'll come in looking for fertilizer with calcium in it. A lot of times the calcium or the blossom end rot, the black spots on the bottom of your tomatoes are more from inconsistent watering, because usually the fertilizer and the soil already has calcium in it, but because of the inconsistent watering, the plant can't take up that calcium. But anyway, so just watch. Having more nitrogen than anything can be a problem, and especially, like I said, if you're doing your lawn too often. Okay, what about weed prevention? Right here, we're looking at broadleaf weeds and grassy weeds. And I have a whole other video and presentation about that if you want to look for it on YouTube. But the bottom line is, I'm here, this is the fun part here. We're talking this whole presentation, I'm trying to have you be aware of things that could cause problems. And in some cases, people expect that weed block is actually going to prevent weeds, and it does, but I see this way too often. Whenever I see a customer buying weed block in the store, even if I'm at the register ringing them out, I say, I feel obligated to ask you, have you killed everything yet? Not just killed it or pulled it, but killed it. It has to be dead, not just mostly dead. It has to be dead. And if it's not dead, it's very possible your plant, those weeds will still come up through the plastic, or not really plastic. It's like yeah. If you had solid plastic, then you've got other issues, because you could put plastic, it has to be a heavy plastic, like on rows between veggie plants or something. But if you put plastic over the roots of shrubs and things like that, it won't get rain. I mean, you might try to make a hole in the middle or something. I don't know how well that works, but you're not allowing for nature to do its thing that way, and not allowing the plants to get as much rain as they need. But this is usually what I see is the mulch on top of the fabric winds up decaying, because it should. It's a biodegradable item. And then you have a nice solid bunch of soil on top of your mulch. And this is usually what I see in different places. You've probably seen it before too. And so I really advise against weed block, but I also like to think about what's going to make it easy. Oh, by the way, this is a picture. I didn't want to put specifically Prune. Prune is probably the most common pre-emergent that will prevent weeds. And you water it in like this. I don't know if you could see the little granules on the ground that have been applied. Once you get your landscaping looking really good, and yes, you can use Roundup, or you can use like a Weed Be Gone or any kind of broadleaf weed control. You could even use it around your shrubs. You could use it around your perennials, as long as you protect them so that the Roundup or whatever doesn't get on the shrub that you want to keep, or on your perennials. It will not go through the roots of the plant and kill the plants you want to keep. So just make sure you shield the plant you want to keep, or make a spraying box, like a open-ended box, top and bottom, and put it on top of the weed and spray in there. And actually Roundup now has a little cup at the end of the spray bottle that you can glom right on top of the weed. And I know a lot of people don't like using that, but if you use it once and get your yard under control, and then in the future prevent weeds by using a pre-emergent, because most weed seeds come through the air from the birds or whatever, and they will grow from seed. It makes a big difference. And I know organic gardeners who still use Prune, and it's one of my favorite products. And no, I do not get paid for saying it. I just think it saves a lot of time. Okay, another thing to be careful of: ground cover covers ground. That's what it's intended to do. That's what we want it to do, right? So this beautiful little round cover is called sweet woodruff, and I love it. But you can see that rose bush I mentioned earlier, that's actually also planted way too close to the garage. There's a hosta here, another hosta here, and that is sweet woodruff that is now growing all the way in here. It winds up just like any ground cover will. If you're not careful, it will cover all kinds of spaces. This, I think, this was at a roadside rest stop. I took this picture. That's a perfect spot for a ground cover, because it is protected on all sides. It cannot creep up into anything else. Now, that's not to say you should never buy a ground cover. You just need to know that it could fill in spaces where you don't want it to. I have a juga growing into my grass in one side of my house. I just left it there. Okay. Again, preventing problems. Do you need 4 steps of lawn care? No, you don't. The first step has the pre-emergent in it. And there's more than one brand that has this 4-step program. I always hate to see people spending too much money on lawns, but if you were to If you do use 4 steps, make sure you leave at least 6 weeks in between so you don't use too much nitrogen. But I think you could also save a lot of money by not fertilizing your lawn all the time. Sometimes fertilizing too much makes too rich of an environment and can cause things like fungus and other diseases. You can use that pre-emergent at the beginning of the season. Like I said, it's kind of like the Prune and the Weed Stop and those other products that prevent seeds from growing. Crabgrass dies at the end of the season anyway. So if you were to put that first step of fertilizer on, you can fertilize your lawn and also prevent any of those seeds from growing. You might not have to fertilize again for the rest of the year. Or if you do, wait until fall, because fall is actually the best time to fertilize your lawn. A lawn is like, it goes into winter, kind of like a bear hibernating, and it eats, and it will take the fertilizer down into the root zone. By the way, if anybody has questions along the way, I'd be glad to take a question, but I will take questions at the end too, okay? So preventing problems. If your landscape edging looks somewhat like this, or if you're thinking about making a landscape edging like this, reconsider, lay a hose down first, and then take a look and see how you're going to be mowing like that. Are you going to be able to traverse those curves like that? Or might you be better off doing something like this? That's a more gradual curve. Okay, just something to think about and prevent you some trouble later. Now, I took this picture of a subdivision near me, and of course, I'm taking it outside the window, trying not to stop traffic. But you can see where each one of these trees has a circle of mulch around it. And I hope, of course, maybe it's not done yet. Maybe they're not done. Maybe they're going to be putting mulch around all of this in here. But just something to think of, because I don't know how you're going to mow in between here. And you're going to be doing a lot of hand mowing if you have a riding mower and you can't fit through there. And actually, some of these trees, I think, are probably going to get too big to be that close together, but that's another story. So here's another example here of the small little islands. So here again, instead of having trees and shrubs with a little mulching area around each one, what if you were to do something like that and fill up that whole area? And yes, you do have to buy mulch or something to fit that with. But again, putting some pre-emergent on in the spring and you're done with it. And then you don't have to go in and out of each of one of those shrubs or trees every time you mow. I like to recommend an edging strip. I think I've seen videos on YouTube. They just referred to it as a dug edge. A landscaper told me about this once. Now that on that picture on the bottom right is a beautifully done dug edge. Mine doesn't look so good anymore, but it has served its purpose for the 20 some years I've had it. And in some places I have added flagstone around the edge just to make it look nicer. But there have been times I've just taken Roundup just along the edge. But for the most part, it has stayed in place. You just take a trench or dig a trench with a shovel and fill it with mulch. And yeah, it's amazing, because you think about commercial landscapers, they don't put the little plastic edgings and that. And I see people buying those, and I hope that I just hope that in a year or two's time, it's still looking good, because I think people have good intentions to buy those. But it's a lot of work to install, especially the ones that have to be, you're digging a trench anyway to put those in the ground. And it seems like after a while, they start to pop out. The heaving and thawing, freezing and thawing from the winter encourages that. One way to prevent weeds is just to leave no room. Now, those are a lot of hostas, but it doesn't. Now, that area in my house where I showed you all the sweet woodruff, my intention was, because I dug up some daylilies that were there in the front and I shared them with friends. My intention is to put a small shrub there. I'm even thinking of a very small hydrangea or something. But nature just has to fill its space. And so if you don't leave much space, yeah. Okay, don't overuse chemicals. First of all, it'll cost you money. I hate seeing people spend money. I do, and it's not my money, but I still hate it. But sometimes you don't even fix the problem. If you overuse chemicals and put, like, for example, that third step of the lawn care program, which has an insect control in it. If you don't have an insect problem, don't use it. You're wasting your money, and you're hurting good insects in the process. But if you could be causing problems because you're over fertilizing. Like I said, it could cause a environment that could be inducive to diseases. But if you're using the wrong product, you're not even going to fix the problem that you have, or the problem that you don't really have. And there's some products like Grubex that have to be applied at a certain time of the year. And if you use it outside of what the label direction says, you're wasting your money, and you're not even going to fix a problem, or you don't have the problem to fix. Always read the label. Yeah, here's another example. And I don't know exactly what that disease is. I'm not an expert on lawn disease or lawns in particular. But like I said, sometimes over fertilizing can cause more problems. But you really shouldn't have to. In Northwest Indiana, you really should not have to water your lawn unless we are in a drought, in which case water deeply and infrequently. If you sprinkle your lawn, and I know I use that term because that's what people say, or they put the sprinklers on, you sprinkle your lawn. Some people do it, I don't know, twice a week or whatever. But if you do that, the soil, the water is only reaching, down a certain depth. And then it's kind of, I wish I could have found a picture of a little spoiled child, because that's what it reminds me of. It's like a spoiled child that is not strong enough to stand on his own 2 feet, because he's so used to getting what he wants. He doesn't have to work for it. And that's the case for your lawn too. And you just want to make sure the roots are deep and solid. If you are doing, and this is a picture I drew of the side of my house. I had to take a patio out, and I want to make sure I added some soil in here, and mulch to make a little bit of a drainage, to make a slope, because you don't want rain to flow towards your house. Now, in this case here, I don't know, I've heard that there are water or bricks that are permeable bricks. I don't know if that's the case here. This is a little island in a subdivision, but that's not a lot of room for water to come through to plant those trees. It's very possible that they just replace those trees every few years, because I have never seen them grow. I've seen a few that have died in that area, but you want to make sure you leave plenty of room. That's the problem you get when you put plastic around tree roots as well. If you're going to use any kind of fabric or weed block, it needs to be something permeable, because tree roots spread out at surface, close to the surface. A way to avoid problems is to avoid a monoculture, which is planting all of the same thing. I mentioned earlier that arborvitae is probably one of the biggest selling plants in the garden industry, I guess. At least it is for us. We sell hundreds or thousands of them maybe each year. It's probably the most returned plant. We have a year-long guarantee, and I think some garden centers probably do too, or especially if they plant them. But it's really hard to replace just one dead arb that's exactly the same size and shape as the one you are getting rid of. It would be much better to have, like the picture at the very beginning, the St. Mary's Hospital picture that has what one of my customers called a dynamic landscape. It changes from season to season. Yeah, and I grew up in an area in Chicago. There was a neighborhood near us called Fair Elms, and maybe you're familiar with the Dutch elm disease that decimated trees. That would have been back in the 60s, maybe 50s, I don't know. So Fair Elms didn't have any elms anymore, and of course now we've got the emerald ash borer. So if you had all ash trees in your area, they wind up, because they're nearby, they spread from one tree to another. Or if your location is not right for a specific kind of plant, say the soil is not acidic enough. If your soil is not acidic enough for blueberries and you planted a whole crop of them, then they're all going to have the same symptoms. Okay, what about floral plants? I mentioned earlier the hydrangeas that customers wanted to buy. If you see anything in floral wrap like this, think florist plant. It's florist plant. You give it to your mom for Mother's Day. Your mom throws it out when she's done. In most cases, just like the tomatoes you buy at the grocery store, they are not chosen for flavor, those tomatoes, they're chosen for shipping. These azaleas and the hydrangeas and all those things are chosen, well, you can see the hydrangeas in the background. They are chosen not necessarily for long-lasting health. They might not even be hardy in our zone, but they are chosen because maybe they ship well, or maybe the color comes on slowly so you can ship them and then have it bloom 2 weeks later. Okay, avoiding problems when pruning trees. Do not chop the ends off, but more than anything, watch this. This little curved part is called the branch collar. So you don't want to cut all the way into here. Oop. You don't want to cut all the way into there and have that big, like this area here. If you were to cut that, that is a long area there. You just really want to cut just a short stub here. Now this could have been on this side here, it could have been that they stopped at this first step or the second step. If you cut the first step here, you're basically getting it started so that when you cut the second step, if it breaks, you're not shearing off everything back in here. You can look into pruning trees if you really want to get into that. I just want to give you a little heads up. Pruning seal, no longer recommended. It does not follow arborist standards anymore. Years ago, it might have been, but they've discovered that it actually harbors diseases, and that trees actually, I want to say, like if you cut yourself and your blood clots, it's very similar. That's called compartmentalization. And so no longer recommended. Save yourself some money. And so same thing with putting whitewash on trees. I forgot about that until just now, but that's not recommended anymore. And I can't even remember why they did that. They apparently, I think it has something to do with the freezing or the winter, which I don't know. But anyway, I think orchardists might still do that, but not recommended. And of course, that just looks ugly. Staking trees, not required in most cases. And if you do decide to stake it, if you're in a very windy area and you want to stake a tree, maybe, but then make it so it's loose. Again, you don't want that. You want the tree to develop deep roots, just like your lawn, develop deep roots. So you don't want it to be a spoiled child that you're going to hold all that. Oh, this would be just like carrying a child for all its life. You're holding it in place. And of course, if you let it sit too long like that, you could see where the wire is actually cutting into the tree itself. And I think that is the end. Yes, there's the phone number for the county extension office, and there's a hotline that's open if you have questions. And I would actually be glad to take questions now. I will call this Stump Lynn time.